Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this panel today about starting and maintaining, which is where we'll spend a lot of our time, a sustainable business, which I'm sure is something a lot of people in the audience, especially the students, are sort of thinking about as they proceed through their time here at FIT. My name is Caroline Palmer, and I am so happy that they gave me a title, and I am on the foundation board at FIT, which has been such an amazing opportunity for me to get to work more closely with the school and with the students. And we have this incredible panel that I want to introduce you to, starting right here with Maxine Bedat. Maxine is the executive director of the soon-to-launch New Standard Institute, which you may have read about recently in the Business of Fashion this week. It is a nonprofit organization that is working on developing an information platform to clarify data and provide a public resource to advance sustainability across the fashion industry. And as we talk a little bit today, you'll find out why that is so important at this time. So welcome, Maxine. Then we have Karen Wood, who is the co-founder of New Nomads. It's an accessibly priced women's wear brand. And lastly, we have Nicole Heim, and she is the co-founder and creative director of Cienne, which is, on the other side, a luxury women's wear brand in the sustainable space. So welcome to everyone to the panel. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is what got you excited as people with fashion backgrounds to take your business, to take a business in this particular direction. And Nicole, I actually may start with you, because when we spoke before, you talked a lot about how you come from the designer standpoint and the creative standpoint, as opposed to maybe the science or the business or the sustainability standpoint. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you got here from your background.
My background is in design and creative, and we started Cienne because I felt there was this opportunity to approach sustainability from a design-driven, kind of modern lens, and building responsibility into how we operate as a brand, as opposed to using it as a marketing message, and really ultimately shifting the responsibility from consumer to company, and continuing to focus, on design and creative as fashion always should be, in my opinion.
Same question
for you. Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm Karen from New Nomads, and I've spent the last 15 years working in the fashion industry, primarily in business development and sales. And the last brand I was with, you guys might know, is the luxury sustainable brand, Mayette. And when they decided to pivot their business model, I was a little stumped on what to do next, and I ended up reconnecting with a former colleague of mine who works in production, and we started brainstorming on what would it look like to launch a new brand, but put sustainability and traceability front and center, and try to package that at a really affordable price point and give consumers, democratize it in a way. So, yeah, and we just launched in November, so we're brand new.
I came at this space through law, so not on the fashion side. And I was working in human rights law and then business law as well, and looking at things from a systems standpoint, having worked at the UN and understood that all of the work that was being discussed and the what was once called the Millennium Development Goals, now the Sustainable Development Goals, tied back to how our things are made and produced. And that was what then led me into the fashion space, and then ultimately to launch NSI to try to bring that systems thinking approach back into the fashion space and try to just clear up some of the frustrations that I was having and I heard colleagues in the space having from a lack of clarity on the data, on what it actually means to be sustainable. And so that was kind of my path.
So one of the things we actually didn't talk, we've had several very robust conversations this group, but actually we didn't talk about is what's been going great? What has been your best day? Why are you so happy you took your careers in this direction? I know yours is a lot newer, but there's been a lot of work going on in it behind the scenes so far, but what's been great about the roles that you have, the companies you've started? Nicole, let's start with you.
I think the collaboration and the sort of collective movement has been my favorite part. We've worked with artisans around the world in terms of hand weaving fabrics, and then we do a lot of our manufacturing here in New York, and sort of all of the people coming together and collaborating and being very open-minded and on new ways of doing things has probably been my favorite, and I would say one of our most successful pieces of the brand.
I would say for us, it's being in rooms like this and having great conversations and really bringing this conversation to the forefront and to the mainstream and getting people to wake up that this is the way of the future and this is what we need to be focusing on. And then there's also little wins all the time, like just something small like, we were searching for a dye house to dye our fabric for months and months and months, and we ended up finding a dye house that's in an industrial park outside of Rajasthan, literally in the middle of nowhere, and they're in an industrial park that's funded by the UN, the EU, and the Swiss government. And through a series of this labyrinth of a journey, we found these guys, and so things like that are big wins.
Well, I would say two kind of parts of my day that get really exciting are, one is to recognize that we are at this inflection point, and you really see it in the spirit of pretty much every single meeting that I've had, where it's no longer, oh, people aren't really interested in this, how can we really get them engaged in sustainability? We've definitely moved beyond that, and I think there is a seriousness now out there that climate change is real. It is not just real, but something that is happening imminently, that we need to take this moment, and we don't have much time, and change things really fundamentally to their core. And that's no longer really being questioned. That's something that people are willing to more and more engage in that conversation and lean into that conversation. That to me is very exciting, because it's only within that energy and that moment and spirit that we can make these big jumps. And then kind of on the more day-to-day, what gets me excited is being able to help brands who are looking, for that one mill, that one supplier, and being able to connect the dots and make your lives a little bit easier.
Well, that was actually a perfect unplanned setup for moving to what has been so great about this period and these jobs that we have, into what have been really big challenges. And I think one of the big challenges that we've talked about here, and we've talked about a lot outside of this conference, is like, how big of a problem is this? And what are the numbers? Like, what is fashion's like organic sticker on your avocado, right? How do we know that something is sustainable? What does sustainable mean? What data can we rely on? We were at a conference recently, and there was statistics just thrown out in every single panel, and you're like, okay, oh wow, that sounds really bad. Is that accurate? Is that accurate? And there's no standardizing body, which, Maxine, what you're doing is amazing. But can we talk a little bit about the fact that there isn't a shared lexicon at the moment to know what sustainability means, and there isn't just a shared set of numbers that we're all working towards, or goals we're working towards as an industry, how that's been like the first stumbling block to making progress, and how you've seen it as day-to-day as designers, and Maxine, especially for what you're working on now to kind of correct this problem.
Do you want to say?
No, go.
Oh, okay. I think having come from the brand and design side, to be in that muck, as you were talking about, of random facts that are sometimes connected to primary sources and sometimes not connected to primary sources, and having to wade through them on a brand side was really impossible. And I think that when we can't have a common lexicon and a common language and a common understanding of what the words around sustainability mean, we're not moving towards anything. We're kind of just, sitting in our own muck. And that was really the impetus in creating NSI and digging through this data, is like, we need as an industry to know where we are in order to know where we're going. And it's that adage of you only manage what you measure. That we're in a situation right now where any brand, any body can come up and say, we're doing things sustainably because X, Y, and Z. And within that milieu, you can't differentiate genuine efforts with greenwashing, and that is not a place where we can actually make progress. So really, with the idea to move away from the design side to how can we help the industry move forward, that was really is the impetus to create NSI and to clarify this data so that if you are in media or if you are a brand, that you can go and say, I can go to this site and I can know that these facts and this information is reliable, and likewise, this is information that is said, but there isn't a primary source that is out there that people can feel confident. And I think it's only within that way that we can clear a path forward to actually having our purchases make the world a place that we can all live in within the environmental bounds that we have.
So in terms of another challenge that I think we talked about is the says-does problem. And I think it's a two-pronged says-does problem, which is one, we've all seen that the consumer does say, I want this, I want this, I want this. But when it comes down to actually the moment of transaction, a lot of things come into play, namely price, before you make those choices. Also availability, selection, things like that. But price seems to be a real stumbling block for a lot of the consumers. And then secondarily, and maybe more problematically, because I can understand it from a consumer perspective, is companies. This is sort of what you're talking about, the greenwashing, and sort of how sustainability has become a really powerful buzzword in marketing. But are the companies saying that they want this stuff, but when it comes down to what they're actually doing, are they making the systemic changes they need to make in order to actually move the needle in this industry? Or are they just using it for their own marketing purposes? So I'm curious, as people who are very deep in the business, when you see larger companies, and you had a lot to say about your trips to Africa, about seeing this, are the companies who are using or who are not actually making any systemic changes a bigger part of the problem than we're acknowledging?
So Cienne is emerging in the sense that we are a small business. So I think our perspective might be different than these guys. But for us, we weren't so interested in going after. First of all, I would say a younger generation certainly is interested and really looking for that in their purchases. I think being that we're in the luxury space, our customer tends to be a little bit older and doesn't care as much. And for us, that was okay. We saw the opportunity as in going after a consumer that wasn't finding something aesthetically that was in line with what they wanted, as well as at a values level. So for us, she's not coming to us for sustainability. And that can sound controversial, but I think the long-term goal for us is that we are bringing her in through design and through quality and through the brand and product, and then over time there's an educational process and there's a loyalty that comes from understanding the way that we're making our product. And so for us, we focus less on just being responsible in business and in design, and less about kind of what the consumer is doing. We're just trying to give her a really good option.
And for us, we're brand new. We've been working on this for a year, and the website went live in November. But it was great because we got to start with a clean slate. And we asked ourselves, okay, here are all the pillars that we want to focus on. So raw materials and the fabrics, the dyeing, the packaging, and the manufacturing. So when you start from nothing, you get to make better choices. I don't work for a billion-dollar brand where you're trying to move the needle and steer an aircraft carrier around in the different directions. So in a way, it was easier, but then you have to find sources for all those things and figure out your supply chain. But for us, that it takes time, and when you're a young brand, you're not doing massive volumes, and when you find special fabric and the mill wants you to buy in 20,000 meters at a time, it's just impossible. So it's, I think the challenges for us is really on the supply side, being able to find vendors that can support you as a younger brand, and it's working with retailers. We launched direct to consumer, and we've been approached by a few different retailers, and we're debating about whether we want to go that route. But some retailers, and you guys know them, they're big, they'll come back to you and say, our customer doesn't care about that. And it's devastating and heartbreaking when they make those comments, and I know you've heard it too. So it's educating the retailers that this is the direction that the world is moving, and then also the consumers. If we all walk outside, the choices that you're presented with on the high street or here on Fifth Avenue, if it's polyester dresses, you have to dig a little deeper if you're a customer to find great product that's, well, ethically made and sustainably sourced. So does that answer the question?
It does. And Maxine, I'm actually curious what you're seeing here as well. Like, do these bigger brands have a responsibility to not just use sustainability as we continue to define it as a marketing platform, but also make different choices to make it easier for smaller brands to access pieces of the supply chain that are difficult for them now? I'm wondering what you're seeing.
Yeah. Well, I think two things there. One, in terms of the discussion of our customer doesn't care about this, or having retailers say that they don't care, that's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. And I think that there is a disconnect, and people care. People care about the environment, but enough stories have not gotten out there connecting the environment, the broader global challenges, to the purchases that they're making in terms of their clothes. In leading up to the creation of NSI and the launch of NSI, we really looked as a team to how did people begin to make the connection with their food. And in the beginning, people were like, well, it's because people eat it and they ingest it, and that's why. And I was like, that's weird, because you don't ingest a car, and yet you care about what car you drive. And so when you really look back at it, the stories have gotten out there. There's enough stories that have news programs, articles, documentaries, books that have connected the dots in those industries, so that we do have this connection. There is a general understanding that, oh, my choice of what water I drink or what food I eat is connected to the planet in some way, or what car I drive, where those stories have not gotten out in the fashion space. And I think it's a big ask to ask emerging brands to both tell the problem, explain the problem, and sell the product. And that was another impetus, in thinking about NSI, was we need to help get those stories out there. We need to, connect to media, to influencers, with the stories. And then connecting to your question, Caroline, I was recently in China and Sri Lanka, actually visiting the factories, because having come from a brand side that was working to do it well, I just wanted to know how it's just done. Mm-hmm. And meeting with the factory managers and owners that work with some of the largest brands out there, they would say to me, and I won't disclose the names of the factories or the brands they work with, but they would say to me, are we solving for a PR issue, or are we solving for a sustainability issue? Because it seems like we're solving for a PR issue. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that are working on the ground, and that was the common message that I've been hearing. And so I do think that, if brands, large and small, do have to take responsibility when they are using these words, that it's translating to what is happening on their day-to-day of what they are doing in their day-to-day practices, not just in a special collection or one piece that they're going to put on the cover of their annual report.
Yes. And a third challenge we talked about, and more of an opportunity, if you will, is sort of the innovations we see coming in this industry. And I know that's been talked about a lot here. But if we look ahead 5 years, 10 years, and the positions you're all in, on your good days, what are you hoping to see as this shift in the industry, this point of inflection? Where do we end up, 5, 10 years down the road? And also, what innovations have you seen coming that you think are really going to transform this business, or at least have the potential to transform this business? We talked a lot about waste in our conversations. We talked a lot about dyeing. What are any of the smaller pieces of the supply chain, as opposed to the entire thing, that you see coming or have heard about that you're interested or excited about that would have an impact on your business?
So for us, one of the big focuses is materials. So percentage of them are artisanal in the sense that they're hand knit or hand woven. Innovative materials we're really interested in. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for those to become more readily available, especially at smaller quantities or volumes. But something like orange fiber, as an example, which is a silk essentially made out of orange peels. I would say manufacturing. Waste is a really big thing for us, and from the beginning we've really been focused on smaller production runs, both from a scarcity perspective, but also just purely from an environmental waste perspective, and something like on-demand manufacturing, which is something we've toyed with a little bit, and I think hopefully will become a bigger thing over the next 5 years, is something that we're really interested in.
And it's something that we've been focused on, and this is just purely based on finances of a small brand, is inventory levels and really keeping our inventory at a manageable, amount. And just making little changes, like we cut to order, and we work with a family-owned business, also in Rajasthan, and they go around to all the local garment manufacturers. They basically scoop up all the scraps off the floor, and they bring that back to their plant, and that's how they make paper, and we use that paper in all of our packaging. So I think that there's like all these little tiny touch points, where we can make a difference.
I'll mention two things. One, on the material side, it's a call to action for the material suppliers, basically, which is that there is confusion in the space of what it is to be sustainable, but yet there are standard ways in which we can have apples to apples comparison of how these different materials, in terms of their carbon, in terms of their water, in terms of their chemistry, and that's through what is called life cycle assessment. And with all of these new materials coming out, I think the only way we can know how excited we should be is that they're doing the LCA work, so that we can know this is something that is truly innovative. And so that's just kind of the plea and the call to action for the materials that are coming out there, because they are new and they are exciting, and there is a lot of potential, but we really need to know kind of under the curtain, and that's the only way to really do it. And then the other kind of trend that I'm really excited about is how the resale market is overtaking disposable fashion. That's so exciting, and I think very exciting for the space, because it means if you are investing in one of these key pieces that's beautifully made, you're going to be able to hold on to the value, and it means that there is a shift in mindset that is happening away from, I think a couple of years ago it just seemed as if disposable fashion was like the only thing ever that was going to exist in the future, and we see how quickly these shifts are changing.
I would second that too. The Real has become a big partner for us, and it's been amazing to have them as a partner, because you're approaching the end of the season so differently than a lot of designers do now, and and they even take samples. So for any designers or brands who have samples, they'll even take those. So it's fascinating, and I think it's so exciting that this has become a really big part of the industry.